He took not away the pillar of the cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before his people. So he was protecting the children of Israel, wasn't he, with a pillar and with a cloud of fire. You know, we find Psalms 105. Let's take a look at a parallel thought on this, what the psalmist David said. Psalms 105. David gives somewhat a pretty good overview, not like Numbers 33, which is actually was God's roadmap that we read from last week, and we may go back to it here in just a minute. But David gives an overview here about what God did delivering Israel. One of the things that I wanted to key in on this as we look at it is along about verse 39. And then we're going to go back and read it because I think there's an interesting point in here that maybe we overlook. And that's the health of these people. The health of these people. And it's very important when they start to cross the Red Sea. But notice what verse 39 says here. He spread a cloud for a covering and fire to give light in the night. He spread a cloud. And then he gave fire to be seen by night. So God is a light, is what it's talking about. The world was walking in darkness. The world here denotes Egypt. They're walking in darkness. Today we see the analogy in this because, you know, very often, you know, we talk and sing songs about God is light, isn't he? So who is our fire or who is our light today? God. Well, how is he our light? Through some manifold, through some mystical manifestation of and the word won't come to me right now, magic, or is it through the Word? It's through the Word, isn't it? It's our light. Things outside the world are darkness, i.e. Egypt and the church, or Egypt and Israel are us today, the world and the church. So there's a big analogy here. But let's go back up and just read through that for just a minute and look at David's overview of what has transpired or what is transpiring here. And this was wrote many centuries after it happened, somewhere around 500 or 600 years after that event happened. So when Moses told the children of Israel, this is going to be a sign for you from generation to generation, guess what he was talking about? And even when we get over into the New Testament, it's still being talked about. And what are we talking about today? The same thing, aren't we? So it was going to last. It's going to be an everlasting sign. So when you go back and you study the Bible, there are things in it that are everlasting signs. Does it have application to us today as in the worship and the serving of God? No. We know when we get to Mount Sinai, the 10 Commandments are given. And 9 out of 10 of the 10 Commandments are carried over in the New Testament in principle, except keeping the Sabbath. But today we go back and learn of what some of these analogies were, and we see the hand of God working in the lives of Israel. That's what we could learn from. The law is our schoolmaster, Paul said, to lead us to Christ. So we can see this is God's roadmap of how we got to where we are at even today. How we got to the church, Acts 2. How we got to where we're at, the growth of the gospel and things of that nature. So anyway, beginning at verse 23, Israel also came into Egypt, and Jacob sojourned in the land of Ham, which is Egypt. And so it's talking about Jacob here coming in. And he increased his people greatly and made them stronger than their enemies. Talking about God. He turned their hearts to hate the people, to deal subtly with his servants. Talking about Pharaoh. He sent Moses his servant and Aaron he had chosen. They showed his signs among them and wonders in the land of Ham or in Egypt. So those were signs, weren't they? Those were wonders. Those were things that we would refer to today. The word I was looking for is in these ways of miracles. And a miracle very simply defined is that which goes against the natural actions or laws of nature. So God used these things as signs and symbols to Pharaoh. He sent darkness and made it dark, and they rebelled not against his word. He turned their waters into blood and slew their fish. Their land brought forth frogs in abundance in the chamber of their kings. He spake, and there came divers sort of flies and lice in all their coasts. He gave them hail for rain and flaming fire in their land. He smote their vines also and their fig trees and brake the trees of their coast. He spake, and the locusts came, and the caterpillars, and that without number. And they did eat up all the herbs in their land, and devour the fruit of the ground. He smote also the firstborn in the land, the chief of all their strength. He brought them forth also with silver and gold, and there was not one feeble person among their tribe. Stop right there. Did you notice something there? About the people? About their health? It's kind of interesting, isn't it? That David here says that he brought them forward with the wealth of Egypt, okay? But notice also he says here, there was not one feeble person among the tribes. That's a healthy group of people, isn't it? You know, when you think about something being feeble, you think about weakness. What he's really saying here, there was not a weak one among them. So, you know, you begin to look at this thing, at what God did and how he delivered them people. He had really prepared this people. And that was a tip-off, wasn't it, in Exodus chapter 1, about the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They're strong women to give birth, aren't they? And so we find that these are things, Daniel, it's kind of amazing when you get to studying it that you don't really realize and pick up on, do you? That is in the Bible about what's going on here in this Exodus. And Egypt was glad when they departed, for the fear of them fell upon them. He spread a cloud for covering and fire to give light in the night. The people asked, and he brought quails and satisfied them with the bread of heaven. He opened the rock, waters gushed out. They ran in the dry places like a river, for he remembered his holy promise in Abraham his servant. And he brought forth his people with joy and his chosen gladness, and gave them the lands of the heathen, or the land of Canaan, and they inherited the labors of those people, that they might observe his statutes and keep his laws. Praise ye the Lord. And so we find David, you know, he gives a pretty good overview of what has gone on here. But I thought that was real interesting about the people not being feeble among them when you go there and look at that. And of course about the cloud and the pillar to give light and protection. Psalms 84 verse 11, I think. Let's look at that right quick, like then we'll move on.
What was your reference of it?
Psalms 84.
Psalms.
84, verse 11. Notice what it says here about God being a light and God being a shield. For the Lord God is a sun and a shield. The Lord will give grace and glory. No good thing will he withhold from them that walketh uprightly. So it talks about God being a light there too, doesn't it? A sun, which was light by fire, and a shield by cloud, wasn't it? So, you know, we find that this is these things referring back to this Exodus. It's going to be found throughout the Bible. And within the Old Testament too, because, you know, we look at what Paul talked about in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Even the Apostle Paul in his day is showing us an analogy about how God saved those people and about our salvation today. And the things that we should do and not do. Beginning in verse 1. Moreover, brethren, I would that you should not be ignorant that all our fathers were under the cloud and passed through the sea, and were all baptized under Moses in the cloud and in the sea. So when they crossed the Red Sea, there was water on each side, but what was over the top of them? A cloud. So read, here becomes an interesting question. Did they cross during the day or at night? It's going to be interesting when we get to that point. It may be not exactly what we think based upon what verse 21 and verse 27 says here. If there's water on each side and a cloud above you, not very much light is there, Jim. Who was the light that's going to tell us? The Lord. The Lord was guiding. The Lord guides us through darkness, read. He is the light. We are in darkness. We walk in a world of darkness today. It's spiritual in nature now. So where is the light to be seen? Sometimes people say at the end of the tunnel. It's the cross. It's the church. That's the light that we walk by today in a dark world still, see? The Lord provides us with life. And so we find, as we look at this, that he didn't take that away. Chapter 14, we're finally going to get there. I spent more time in that than I really wanted to, okay? But that's okay. Any of you brethren got any comments you want to make so far before I hit 14? Okay. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, that they turn and encamp before Hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, over against Baal-zephon, before it shall be encamped by the sea. And this is real interesting. When you look at this on the map, and you come down when they left Goshen, they're actually traveling south, what we would call southeast today. And it talked about, and we went over and read Numbers chapter 33 about them camping at Pidon and Succoth. And it's talking about how another place they camped between this Hahiroth and Succoth, they called Etham. And they're not real sure exactly where that was located, but it is mentioned it's somewhere in between those two places. And it's going to be here that we find that they're going to cross over the Suez Canal, as it's called today, or the Red Sea, a part of it back then. If you look at it on the map, I was hoping to have this on the overhead so I could put it here, but I still haven't got used to operating this new system yet, so I may come back to this in a few weeks if I get myself acclimated to it and do it. So, and that's where they're going to cross over the wilderness of sin. And I think maybe we talked a little bit about these places last week. They're kind of significant where they're going to camp between this Migdol over against Baal-zephon. This Baal-zephon is a type of mountainous region. It was a seaport outpost, things of that nature, and it refers to one of the Egyptian gods. And I think we talked about that last week. This is their sea god, their maritime god, if you will, that protects the sea and the maritime trade and all this. It's kind of interesting that they would camp within that region, isn't it? Or where that god is at. Well, what is God doing here with this still? Pharaoh. He's still attacking the gods of Egypt. So here you have this god here. In the Greek, he's known as Zeus, and in the Romans, he's known as Jupiter. It's a similar god. He's not the exact same one, but they have a type of this same sea god, okay? And we probably remember this in Greek mythology when we studied about all these sea gods and the swords anyway, that's another story. That's been so long ago, Jeff, I'd have to go back and look at it, but I remember some of it, okay? Anyway, it's Greek and Roman mythology. And so we find here they're going to be camped here, and God said, now you're going to be in here. Well, we're going to see Pharaoh take a look at this and say, Moses must be not right or in his right mind, because they got the sea here, they got the mountainous range here, and I'm behind them. Where are they going to go? It's kind of interesting. Here again, I go back to the statement that one historian said it looks like God's providence is setting Pharaoh up to fail, don't it? And showing him there's no power still in his gods and in his stubbornness. And so this area, and I think we talked about this last week, here we know this Red Sea at this point to where it's at, we're talking about a 10 to 12 mile width of area here, okay, where they're going to be crossing it. And if you look at that on the map, the Gulf of Suez is not a very wide gulf, and compared to the body of the Red Sea that brushes up against what we call Saudi Arabia on one side and the body of Egypt on the other, and when you come on down to Ethiopia. So anyway, here they are. This is where God called them to camp. It would appear they're trapped. And that's what the children of Israel are going to think here in a little bit. It would appear that God has led us out here to this trap. He's led us out here with nowhere to go. And there were graves we could have been buried in, Jeff, in Egypt. It's kind of a sarcastic, mocking comment they're going to make to him if we get that far. For Pharaoh was saying, the children of Israel, they are entangled in the land. The wilderness has shut them in. See there? Pharaoh said, aha, they're trapped. The wilderness has got them blocked, and I got them now. I got them. Moses didn't know what he was doing, and when he let them out here, how come Moses, logistically thinking, Greg, in my mind, I would have went from where they were at, I went up the Mediterranean coast, on into Canaan, right? I took my chances with the rest of it as a human being, Daniel, okay? That's my way of doing it, okay? I got 660,000 men that are eligible for war, but really, does it say anywhere where they're armed? It doesn't. Remember, these were slaves. Slaves aren't armed, are they? As far as we can tell, there's no mention of them ever taking any of the Egyptian arms with them, because if they had tried to take the Egyptian chariots and armament with them, what would they had to have done, Greg? Fight the Egyptians, right? Well, they didn't have nothing to fight with. That plays a factor in here. Do you see what this thing is really doing? It's really building faith from milk to meat. You know, he said he didn't think they would be able, if they were attacked and had to fight there on that easy way, that they would be able to withstand it, that they would want to go back to Egypt. So God is protecting them. He's showing and still demonstrating to them who he is. Anyway, Pharaoh's thinking, aha, now they're trapped in the wilderness. And that's what they're going to think. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, that he shall follow after them. And I will be honored upon Pharaoh and upon all his host, and that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord, and they did so. So here again we find that statement. God said, I'm going to be honored among Pharaoh. I'm going to be respected. That honor also says that he is going to pour out his power and wrath upon Pharaoh too. Okay? What happens very often in our circular life when men of honor are slandered? You get to feel the wrath, don't you? Pharaoh's going to see who I am, finally and for last. But it's going to be his undoings, you know? It's going to be his undoings. And so we find that this is going to happen, that they know that I am the Lord thy God. And it was told the king, verse 5 of Egypt, that the people fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and his servants were turned against the people, and they said, why have we done this, that we let Israel go from serving us? They have a change of heart. Remember these servants and these advisors and things a few chapters earlier? What did they tell Pharaoh about all these plagues? You need to let these people go. You're going to destroy Egypt. But you know that sentiment of respect and recognizing the authority of God was short-lived, wasn't it? It was short-lived. What have we done? We let these people go. They done took our gold and our silver, and now we don't have any workers to maintain Egypt, and now that the world around about us is going to see how weak we are, and the enemy is going to come in. You know, it was all political, militarily structured in their minds, okay? What have we done? And so we find that they said that Pharaoh in verse 6 made ready his chariots and took his people with him. And he took 600 chosen chariots and all the chariots of Egypt and captains over every one of them. So Pharaoh amassed a vast army, didn't he? What we find with the chariots, and we know these are things and instruments of war, chariots were a very state-of-the-art, sophisticated weapon that the Egyptians used. And we've kind of seen shadows and types of that, in our movies and televisions and things of that nature, how they would equip those chariots. A lot of times you'd have a chariot with a driver, and you may have a man with a spear, or you may have two men in there with a spear, or you may have two men in there, or a man in there with bows and arrows, right? It was a very formidable weapon of war because it was what? Mobile. So what is that equivalent today in our thought type in our military establishment? Tanks and armored vehicles, right? What are they? They're deadly and they're mobile, aren't they? They can move fast is the thing. Is the whole point. And so we find you got 600 prime Egyptian tanks coming at you. Now, what do you think about that? Rita, I hate to know I had 600 M1 Abrams staring me down, wouldn't you? Yeah, it'd be pretty bad, wouldn't it? Sure would. Cause for fear, isn't it? Plus the Egyptian army. These people were well trained. These are not, Egypt at this time is still the then known superpower of the world. These are not backwoods trained, so to speak, renegades. This is an established army, okay, of people. They're nobody to play with. And so Pharaoh made ready his chariots. He took 600 of them, and all the chariots of evil, and captains over every one of them. So these captains are men that are usually well structured in what? Warfare. They're the leaders. They're well instructed. Probably, no doubt, at this period of time, maybe even like sometimes today, you'll find that people in the military a lot of times that have a little rank on them have led men into what? Conflict. So in a sense you could say some of these men, no doubt, will probably battle hard. They've seen firsthand how to operate and to manipulate a battlefield. So the point God is trying to make, this is a strong force of Satan. This is a strong wall of Satan. And you know, we kind of see Satan's army today in a similar manner. You can look around and say, there are things and events that Satan uses in the world. It's a strong army. It sure is. How are we as a church going to withstand against that? And that's Israel out there, see? How are we going to withstand against this? You know, we're just a little bitty speck in the pond compared to this. But you know, God don't need but a speck, does he? He don't need but just a little bit of light, does he, Brother Colin? You know? And so we find that the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued after the children of Israel, and the children of Israel went out with a high hand. And so we find that the children of Israel now is on the move, and they went out of Israel, and they went out, and the children of Israel went out with a high hand. Well, they did have a high hand, didn't they? They had a lot of the Egyptian wealth in there, and no doubt too. You can think about maybe the high-handedness here. Not no much the upper hand, but you can imagine the rejoicing and the happiness and all that was going on with this. They felt like they had it all going on, didn't they, when they left out? But God don't like high-handedness, does he, as far as our attitude? What does he like? Humbleness and humility. Well, let's look and see what's fixing to happen here. But the Egyptians, in verse 9, pursued after them. All the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, his horsemen and his army, and overtook them encamping by the sea beside Harod before Beelzebub. Okay? So where were they camped at? They were in this area right here, what? Beside. You know, it looks like they're really trapped out here in this wilderness, you know. Like Pharaoh said, what is Moses doing? And notice what verse 10 says. And when Pharaoh drew nigh, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them, and they were so afraid, and the children of Israel cried out unto the Lord. So they could see them coming down. And they were so afraid. Well, you know, in a human sense, rightfully so, right? I mean, you got all this coming down. You've been led out of Egyptian bondage. You've been led out here into this wilderness. And maybe you're even perplexed as why we didn't take the highway. We took the low way, didn't we? We went through the briars and bramble. We didn't go out there on 65. Now we're going to die, Greg. You know, so you can see in their eyes how the panic would take place. But what we've got to remember is 2 Corinthians 4:8. And this is what we're going to see demonstrated here, is what Paul is thinking about here in 2 Corinthians chapter 4. And let's see, where am I at? Verse 8, we are troubled on every side. Would it be fair to say they're troubled on every side? Looks like it does. Paul felt like in his day, because of the battle that he was having with the world around about him and with things going on in the church that shouldn't, that he was troubled on every side. But he said, I'm not distressed. I'm not stressed by it. We are perplexed, made to wonder sometimes, don't we? But we're never in despair, are we? Made to wonder. Sometimes persecuted. But notice what he says here. Not forsaken. Cast down. Yeah. But not destroyed. Always bearing about the body, the dying of the Lord Jesus Christ, that the life of Jesus might be made known in our body. So what's this all about? Letting Jesus be known through our life, right? That we're not like others. Yeah, we're going to suffer things like other people suffer. Sometimes we're going to be discouraged, aren't we? Oh, yeah. Sometimes that's not hard to be, is discouraged, is it? But we don't have to be blotted out or darkened out by it, do we? We can go to God and we can pray about it. And there's something that we're going to see here too is not only should we pray about it, but we've got to get up and move forward with it. In other words, we've got to act on that prayer. We've got to believe God is going to take care of it. You know, it's just like anything else. We can say, yeah, I believe you ought to be baptized. You ought to be baptized. Yeah, we can talk about it all day long. I ought to be baptized. I know I ought to do it. But until we do it, what are we just doing? Talking. We got to act on things, haven't we? We got to act on. God expects us to do our part. By us acting, what do we show forth in that? We show forth our faith that we believe our prayer is going to be what, Jeff? Answered. And this is what he's going to see here. He's going to, matter of fact, tell them that. Listen, you guys got to go forward now with this thing. You know, once I part this Red Sea, you got to go through it. It's fearful. It's horrifying maybe to see these things if you just stop and think about it through. But you've got to take that step. Okay? And this is what he's going to show them here in a little bit. And the children of Israel cried out in verse 11. Here we go. This is kind of a mocking statement, kind of being sarcastic. You know, they are afraid. And so they say to Moses, because there were no graves in Israel, thou hast taken us away to die in the wilderness. Wherefore hast thou dealt with us to carry us forward out of Egypt. Basically what they're saying here, aren't there any graves in Egypt? Historians tell us, and some of the commentators say that's one thing that Egypt did. They had a lot of areas to bury the dead. Okay? And so it seems to be what they're alluding to. There's plenty of burial places in Egypt. You done let us out here into this wilderness to die. Where are the burial places? We've been better off in Egypt. At least we'd be buried. You know, that shows you how quick and how fickle people can be all of a sudden. Now you would think in our eyes, or in my eyes, that seeing all these things that happened in Egypt, I wouldn't have thought nothing about this, right? No, that's not the way we operate, really, is it? We really operate no different than they do, you know. We make it through one trial, and the next trial come up, and the first thing we say, why has God forsaken us? Right? You know, that's how we are as humans, right? And this is the way they will operate. But you know, Moses is going to tell them something that's real important, that's very applicable for us today. And I've heard lessons preached on this. I think I've even got a few of them 30 years ago, Daniel. Stand still and see the power of the Lord. Boy, that's a very important statement even for us today. We're going to see this in the life of the children of Israel. Thou hast taken us away to die in this wilderness, wherefore thou hast dealt with us, carry us forth out of Egypt to do this. Is this not this word that we did tell thee in Egypt, saying, let us alone? So they go all the way back, excuse me, when Moses first went in there. And was going to try to deliver them, and what they tell Moses? Who be the Lord of us? The Egyptians are our Lord. You know, and as Pharaoh ratcheted up their trials, it became even worse, didn't it? So now they go all the way back to when they first encountered Moses, And they tell him, didn't we tell you in Egypt saying, let us alone, leave us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? You know, Moses and his rod is depicted as the Word of God, right? His rod, the Word, Moses is acting in proxy for God, as we studied earlier. So, really, what are they saying? Is it not comments that sometimes that you will hear today trying to teach people? Let us alone. We like being in Egypt. We don't want to hear it. You know? And it's the same thought pattern that's carried over here. We'd rather be in Egypt than to be out here protected by God and following you, Moses. Look at what you done led us into out here today. It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. We've been better off back there under the taskmasters of the Egyptians. Sometimes when people encounter the church and they encounter the gospel, a decision has to be made. And that's whether or not to obey it, whether to come out of Egypt or stay in Egypt. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. And you've known people, I've known people down through the years that would obey the gospel, become members of the church. The going gets a little bit tough, and where do they go? Back to Egypt. They go back to the world, don't they? They go back to sin. Because, see, here what we're seeing here, did God give them the easy path to go? Or did he give them a difficult path to go? A trying path to go? The trying of your faith, Peter said, is what? Much more precious than gold tried by fire. So how will our trials come? Sometimes by fire, won't they? So what is God doing here with these people? What is he doing with us today? When we think of this in a type of analogy, you know, we're going to come out here and serve the Lord. And Moses said unto the people, fear not, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. And really, when you look at this term salvation as it's used here, he's talking about you're going to see the Lord protecting you from harm. That would be their salvation crossing the Red Sea. It's a type of shadow.
Salvation, that means stand still and see the saving power of the Lord.
Well put.
It's the saving power.
Right. That's it.
What it
and so the saving power of the Lord was going to come how? By them obeying, going down into the Red Sea, wasn't it? And coming up on the other side, baptized under Moses.
They was trying to give up right at the last minute when they were right at the door of seeing what they need to see.
Right.
But it shows us that we see that they had a very weak faith at that time. Their faith wasn't that strong.
Was not that strong. And that's why he took them the way he
So
did.
the Bible teaches us that the stronger your faith gets, the more you fear the Lord.
Right.
Because there is no want in the one that, you go back there where you were a while ago in Psalms, and it'll tell you that there is no want in them that fear the Lord. If you fear the Lord, your wants will be supplied. You won't have to worry about nothing.
That's right. That's right. And so Moses here makes a very powerful statement. Mm-hmm. And we're going to stop right here in just a minute and kind of pick up right there. But also think about this during the upcoming week. Stand still and see the power of the Lord. You know, we live in a hectic world, don't we? And a lot of times we're going from this to this to this to this to this, just like that. It's rapid. The world's rapid paced, isn't it? And a lot of times we're caught up in that rapid pace, aren't we? With various things. You know, we have our work life, we have our activity life, we have our church life, and we have all these things going on. And very often it's wearing not only physically, but spiritually too, isn't it? So what do we need to do every once in a while, you think? Stand still.
Take inventory.
There you go. See the power of the Lord. You know, very often people that have gotten themselves into trouble and situations and abusive things with alcohol and drugs and things of this nature, When does their thoughts really start settling in? When they get real still, the night's real quiet, and all you got is your thoughts. And they can't sleep at night, Jeff. So we got to get up and have another shot. We got to take some more pills. What's setting in? The conscience is setting in. They're actually standing still. God is letting them see their situation, isn't he? But we need to stand still too. And take inventory, as you said, and see our situation. Stand still and see the power of the Lord. That's the only way we're going to be able to take inventory, isn't it? The world's going to see to it with its rapidity that we never stand still. There's always the next TV program. There's always the next ball game. There's always the next fishing tournament. There's always the next whatever, isn't it? It's never ending. If we don't watch it, we'll wind up in that never-ending process, you know. Stand still and see the power of the Lord. I'm going to stop right there. We'll pick up there next week, make some more comments on that. We'll get ready for